Are you a consumer of microplastics? We'll talk about even what that means straight ahead on the program. Facebook has 2 billion users, but are they invading your privacy with optional tools? We'll talk about that as well. And are Americans essentially greedy? After Thanksgiving, you might think so. Hello there, Terry here on Think America, where we reason first and then converse. Welcome to America's Radio Town Hall. I'm Terry Gilberg. Every week I invite real Americans, non-broadcasters, to the program to download and let their hair down with me about thought-provoking conversation starters. This week, no different. We have Tom. Tom is a youth football coach for a junior high. Hey, Tom, welcome to the program.
Hey, Terry, thanks for having me.
Nice to have you on board. And Richard is with us as well. Richard works in the real estate and mortgage industry. He is a mortgage broker. Hi, Richard.
Hi, Terry.
All right, let's get started, guys. I want to get right into the program and give this a lot of time, as much time as we can, for the first segment. The birthright citizenship issue. Maybe you've heard of this term. The president says he's intending to end birthright citizenship through executive order. And he so far hasn't backed off of that. He got into a heated pushback, though, right before the midterm election. And we haven't heard a lot of it lately because we've been hearing a lot about caravans and so forth. But it does dovetail into the caravan issue. And part of the problem, I think, why we haven't heard a lot on this is because it is already one of the longest standing debates of the Constitution, whether or not specifically the 14th Amendment affords citizenship to anybody that's born on U.S. soil or not. And it comes down to about 6 words. They are, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And these words have long been argued to mean in some cases that if you are here and you are born on U.S. soil, you are automatically the subject to U.S. jurisdiction. Thereby, you're a citizen. Other legal scholars say, wait a minute. It's not just where you're born. Let's say a woman can come over touring the United States and she's from Thailand and all of a sudden she has a baby because she goes into premature labor or whatever. Maybe she shouldn't be here, but she comes. Let's say she's touring the United States for 3 months in the summer and then boom, gives birth. No, others say no, it is the rule of blood, meaning that child is of that woman's lineage or heritage, so therefore not a U.S. citizen. Now, the Supreme Court has looked at this with past cases, one in particular having to do with Chinese husband and wife who gave birth to a daughter, and this goes back to the late 1800s, but they had a right to work in the United States, and they were working in California. So this thing hasn't been looked at, Tom, very recently. I want to start with you on your gut about all of this.
Well, Terry, with this, it's manipulation of the words, and this is why those on the left are fellow Americans. They like to twist the words. They like to call the Constitution a living, breathing document. And what this comes down to is it was created for those who were slaves and their children after slavery was abolished. And
that's correct. That
was the sole focus. And we also had a Native American population at the time. And that was also part of why the word choice was what it was. To think that this applies to any and every person throughout the world, just come here, have a baby, now they're a citizen. And, oh, you mom and dad, you can hang around too because we can't throw our citizens out. So I guess we'll just have to deal with you. It's just such a manipulation, and it throws all logic and common sense out the window. Tug at heartstrings, create new voters, and screw over the American public. That's
so, Tom, you would say that we can't throw the mom and dad out, as you said. So that goes to this kind of chain migration that the president is talking about, yes?
Well, I said that from what the liberals believe and how they view it. No, if you're from India and you come have a kid, or you're from an Asian country, because we do know that is happening, where pregnant mothers get here for a tour right when they need to have a baby, and now they have an American citizen. My position is no, we throw them all out. They're not citizens. I'm not going to follow that illogical argument that the left wants to give us.
Well, I was actually referring to how Trump says this is what happens, Richard. For example, a woman comes from Thailand. She's visiting, let's say she's visiting New York, Statue of Liberty, Ellis Island, all of that, and going to Broadway shows, and boom, she has a baby prematurely. And so, there's this kind of loophole in this birthright citizenship law. And Trump is saying, by extension, even if that baby is an American citizen, because we haven't cleaned up the law yet and the Supreme Court hasn't looked at it recently, even if it is an American citizen, that woman from Thailand doesn't necessarily need to become a citizen through chain migration, Richard.
Yeah, which I agree with the president on this wholeheartedly. As Tom had mentioned, this was something created to protect the rights of these who had been slaves. The Democrats in the South were really abusing legally the rights of these prior slaves after the wonderful Republican president Abraham Lincoln and that wonderful Emancipation Proclamation. They were not being given equal protection under the law. I can understand why the 14th Amendment is there, but it has become something else. We have people traveling here to have children, not paying their medical bills, to create that citizenship for their child, which oftentimes becomes citizenship for the whole family. And I have many dear friends that work in the hospitals and see this regularly. And one of the frustrating parts is many of those who just happen to get here late in a pregnancy and happen to have their child while they're here don't even pay their medical bills. They are abusing our system in every way possible.
Mm-hmm. To me, it comes down to the tug between, and I want to say these French words correctly, it's the rule of jus sanguinis, or just from the blood, or the right of blood, versus the right of soil, the rule of jus soli. And these are old terms in other European countries, in France and in other European countries, I might add. It's all the right of blood. In other words, they use the rule of the right of blood, meaning if you're a Thai baby, even though you're born in New York City, you are Thai. The jurisdiction is Thailand. It is not United States of America. You may have been born here, but it's not that you are a U.S. citizen. And we're kind of rare in this. And we're rare in this now there are other countries that look at it like we do. But I want to point out that we're rare in this because we haven't looked at this law since 1898, really. And it's my take that the Supreme Court needs to get involved, Tom. The Supreme Court, I don't think it's an issue for Congress. I don't think it's an issue for lower appellate courts. It is the Supreme Court. So here's a question to you, Tom, and then to you, Richard. The Supreme Court looked at this last in 1898 with the Chinese couple. But the interesting thing there is they had work permits to work in the San Francisco Bay Area, and they had a child. So they were legal residents, not like somebody just running across the border and illegal and then plops a kid here. Do you think the Supreme Court, Tom, with the new justices there, with Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, will lean toward Trump's thinking?
I believe that the most recent Supreme Court justices will continue to assess the law, ignore whatever president is sitting in the office, and follow the law. The six, as you might have referenced earlier, six poorly chosen words, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That is why the Chinese case from the late 1800s said that their child was an American citizen. They were subject to, sorry, I just lost my thoughts. They were subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That's why. And I believe that the Supreme Court justices...
Well, in fact, Tom, That's really not why legally. I know how you're looking at it, but legally they were subjected to the jurisdiction thereof because those Chinese workers, husband and wife, had a legal permit to be here.
That's
the issue, and therefore the child is a U.S. citizen according to the Supreme Court 1898. What I'm trying to get at is with this so-called right-leaning court, do you think if it goes to the Supreme Court, and frankly, I think President Trump is pushing the matter, I think they will, because it's right-leaning, they will side with President Trump and say it is the rule of the right of blood, not the right of soil, Tom.
Well, yes. I mean, we're basically saying and agreeing on the same points here. I just really don't like hearing the Supreme Court referred to as right-leaning or left-leaning, although there are activists on the left side for sure. Sotomayor, I'm looking at you. Ginsburg, looking at you. And the other one, I forget her name. But
it's Elena Kagan. Let Richard get it. Yeah. Richard, your take on this, because these words are important, and it does go down to interpretation by the highest court.
Yeah, super hard to say what the court's going to do. I think President Trump is going to issue an executive order on this, and it'll be interesting to see how that argument plays out. I'm hopeful that the court will agree with him. I think those words are soft words, which means it allows for interpretation either way. I also think that if that doesn't go well, we're at least 2 years from Congress taking a look at it, and frankly, Congress is politically the biggest group of cowards. You know, we seem to put in people who are really only interested in their next election. And so getting something as important done as an appropriate correction to this 14th Amendment, I think it's going to be really hard, even if Republicans retake Congress here in a couple of years.
Well, the situation has gotten so out of control where women come in what's called tourism, birth tourism. So you would fly in from Mexico City to see the Grand Canyon or to see the greatest shopping mall in America in Minneapolis or surroundings or wherever you want to go. And you want to see a football game or something. And then there's your child. And that woman is illegal. If the woman is illegal without a work permit, without any kind of reason for being here, or running across the border or pushing their way in, as what we're seeing in Tijuana right now. And the sad faces and the crying and I'm pregnant or I'm this or I'm that. This has to be taken care of at the highest level, in my humble opinion. And those words matter. And yes, whether we want to say it's left or right leaning, the reality is it is left or right leaning. I'm Terry Gilbert. You're listening to Think America, where we reason first, then converse. More great thought-provoking topics straight ahead. Find us at thinkamericaradio.com and hit the podcast for all of our past shows. Be right back. Do you chew on your plastic pens and the ends of your plastic glasses? You may be breaking off tiny, tiny little pieces of plastics, which are now called microplastics. And if you're unlucky, they will find their way into your stomach, intestines, and sometimes into your bloodstream. We're talking about this on the program today because scientists are worried that the plastic can get stuck and produce side effects inside your body. Now, Terry Gilbert, I am guilty of chewing on my pencils, especially when I was in school, chewing on pens, nervously kind of clicking the pen on and off, pulling off that metal bar on the end as if you were to stick your pen inside your shirt pocket and then chewing on the back of it. So I wouldn't be surprised to learn that microplastics are showing up in my body somewhere. Richard, what do you think?
It's a concern for me as well. I'm not a chewer on pens, but I have a night guard to protect my teeth. So at night, I'll grind my teeth together so I don't have something protecting my teeth that'll ruin my teeth. So to think that these microparticles of plastic are getting into my body, potentially making me sick. Something I've thought was safe, something that was given to me by a dentist. Now I'm sitting here thinking, oh, great, what's the long-term result of this mess?
Well, I'm not sure what the long-term result, but the good news is that it's showing up mostly in fish. Not fish, seafood, I should say, particularly in seafood such as mussels, oysters, some lobsters. So it's good news in the sense that scientists are pointing out that nothing about a night guard, nothing about pens per se. They're talking about how seafood, I needed to make that distinction. Seafood may be eating other fish that have mistakenly eaten plastic as food. It's toxic for those fish in their liver, and then it's eaten by, let's say, a lobster. So it's tiny, tiny millions and millions of tons. So if you're not necessarily a seafood eater, you might be okay. That night guard might be okay for now. In other words, scientists haven't linked it. Tom, what is your take? Do you have a night guard? Do you chew on pens?
I don't chew on pens. I don't have a night guard. But, obviously, yeah, we don't want to be ingesting plastics, definitely. When I hear this topic and I think about things and I hear about this study, I kind of have a lot of thoughts. One is I wish I could see this study from start to finish and observe it and make sure people aren't manipulating it. I mean, with the climate change, cold or warm or lukewarm or whatever you want to call it, we know it's being manipulated. Is this being manipulated? Is this part of the whole push to eliminate plastics and clean up the ocean? And they want to point the finger at America, but it's the third world countries where these plastics are floating around in their seas. What angle are they really going to? What is their end game? Because I don't believe they just care about people. I think that there's some end game and there's some ulterior motive here. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just have a lot of concerns with this and trusting it.
And your sentiment is accepted and certainly viewed by a lot of people, I myself included. But here's one of the facts. 8.8 million tons of plastic waste enters the ocean every year, according to most scientists. Now, just process that. Some has sunk to the bottom of wherever the ocean floor is at that particular time. Some has drifted out. Some has washed ashore, and some is digested by shellfish, mostly seafood, shellfish. And so with that logical progression, if you're out there eating lobster, and indeed, I had lobster, believe it or not, for Thanksgiving. Why? Because it was a treat. It was different. Pilgrims had a lot of lobster, by the way, at the first Thanksgiving, not just a bird or a big bird. Or in any event, chances are I have a little bit of those microplastics showing up as a result of very, very tiny, as a result of shellfish. The point is, buy shellfish from known sources. There's not many studies linking the human element, but it is a little bit cause for concern. Richard, I'll let you get in.
I've never been fooled by the climate scientists. There's so much about this theory of global warming that has been used to scare people and just frankly isn't true. But the dirty ocean is a real problem. I'm not a tree hugger, but I would say I'm a conservationalist, and it bothers me to death that we have dumped so much waste into the ocean. We need to get it cleaned up. It's having an effect on the wildlife, certainly, but it's going to have an effect on us also, because we all at some point eat animals, something that's been exposed to this plastic. And it's frustrating to me that people are so sloppy with their trash.
I think you would agree too, Tom. And by the way, some of these items, not just in shellfish and seafood, but some of the items are being found in exfoliants and even in toothpaste. Tom, I'll give you the last word. We're down to about 30 seconds.
Hey, I'm all for cleaning up the environment. I enjoy the outdoors myself. So let's look at the plastics, hard plastics. What is that? Oh, cell phones, laptops, all these other fun little gadgets and gizmos. I'm good with eliminating it. The more we eliminate technology,
okay. We'll eliminate our cell phones starting tomorrow.
Hey, well, that's really what the people have to look at.
Straight ahead on Think America, we'll be talking about whether or not America is in fact greedy. Welcome back to Think America with Terry Gilberg, where we reason it out first and then we talk about it or converse. You can find me on Facebook, Terry Talk Radio, and get to our podcast. Subscribe. ThinkAmericaRadio.com. I'm delighted to bring Dr. Michelle Bankston to the air. She is a neuropsychologist looking at behavior and brain connection. I love this topic, Dr. Michelle Bankston. Are Americans greedy? Let's start there. During Black Friday and throughout the holiday season, it seems this way. We live in a land of plenty, but we don't act like it on Black Friday, for crying out loud. We fight to the point of death over the sale at a mall. We stab each other. It seems not everybody, of course, but there was gunshots that rang out on this past Black Friday. So how do we go from gratitude the previous day to greed?
Oh, well, Terry, this is such an epidemic. I saw on the news, fights breaking out over objects. And the sad thing was parents were doing this in front of their children. But part of the problem is we live in such a competitive society and we measure our success by finishing in first place or making it to the top of our game or having better toys than our neighbors. So it appears that, we value instant gratification by encouraging people to consume rather than to save and to hoard rather than to give. And so we go from Thanksgiving to then trying to fulfill needs by being that first in line or the one who has that prized Christmas item.
I thought we were, as a nation culturally over all these years, a nation of givers. I mean, we help out all kinds of countries all over the place, all over the globe with our American military prowess, try to keep the peace. We give to charities abroad. We give on all kinds of giving ways domestically. Look at the Salvation Army, look at the Red Cross. I mean, the list goes on and on. So on balance, I think we're a country that is a country of givers. But boy, does that switch in a New York minute, Dr. Bankston, on Black Friday. Is the focus then, should the focus be to calm Black Friday down, have no stores open? It all starts at 8 a.m. the next day and, have lines around the block like you would have a line getting into a rock concert or the Super Bowl or something like that.
Well, there is something to be said about that, Terry. And I think maybe if we took less emphasis off that Black Friday and didn't see all the sales that just perpetuate it, I think that might help. But ultimately, I wonder if we wouldn't then have the same problem on Cyber Saturday. But greed is really a selfish or excessive desire for more than what is needed or deserved. And when that is part of a person's character, it's insatiable. Really, greed is just another kind of addiction. And the problem is with addictions is that enough is never enough. So whether we're talking alcohol or drugs or, the yacht or the new car, enough is never enough. So if you were to talk to millionaires and billionaires and ask them, when will you have enough money? They can't give you an answer because it's never enough. And we're constantly seeking for more and more of whatever our drug of choice is. And that's what we're seeing on Black Friday. We're looking for more and more. And it doesn't matter how much we have. It's not enough.
Well, it certainly isn't peaceful, that's for sure. And our hearts go out to the shooting victim at that Alabama Galleria Mall on Black Friday.
Yeah.
One black man was shot dead in error, now we hear. The gunman is on the loose. I haven't heard anything, Dr. Bankston, about him. 2 were shot in the hospital, surviving with all of their wounds. 1 is dead. And now the police are devastated because they tried to control it all. And apparently 1 officer shot a black man in error, thinking he was the shooter. it's out of control. Let's move on. You talk about self-serving and greed and all of those points about it's never enough. Is it ever enough with all of these selfies that we see online? Selfies are photoshopped. People look for better lighting, angles, composition. They crop things. They add little extras to it. What is happening with this kind of narcissistic, never enough effort on Facebook and on all of Instagram and so forth? As a neuropsychologist, what comments can you give us about that?
Well, Terry, I think both issues, both these perfected selfies as well as the greed topic, it really goes back to an issue of fear and insecurity. And so what people are trying to do is fill a hole. But the problem is that they're not able to fill it. What they really are trying to do is fill their heart's desire, which they don't realize isn't for wealth. It's for love. It's for emotional intimacy. It's for unconditional acceptance, even self-acceptance, and rich, satisfying relationships. And what we're doing is breeding that in our children so that they don't believe that they are enough the way they are. We're trying to perfect this image so that other people will think that we are better than we are, rather than recognizing we're all created individually and we're all created in God's image. And that is enough.
It certainly makes people more anxious. It certainly makes people feeling like they're never satisfied. They have to manipulate the image. I read somewhere where the term is now in the world of psychology called impression management, managing the impression always. Now, I can understand how a celebrity, whether you're a Hollywood celebrity, you're a beautiful model, maybe an athlete, would always look to get a most positive image out there. That's their life. That's their lifeblood. That's their work. But instead, we have people who aren't celebrities trying to manage these impressions. I think I read on your blog that it's called in more sophisticated terms, perhaps Snapchat dysmorphia. Do I have that right? And what exactly is that?
Yes. Basically what that is that we see ourselves, but we don't see ourselves as good enough. And so then we're constantly trying to do better, to look better. And unfortunately, social media, whether it's Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook, social media perpetuates this because we have come to identify our worth with how many likes, comments, and shares we get. And heaven forbid if we are unfriended by somebody, then it makes us feel like we're not as good as we thought we were. And it just leads to more of that impression management. And we're teaching our children to do exactly the same thing. If you don't apply the right filter, you're just not pretty enough. You're just not going to get the same number of likes as the next person.
People have built in empires online by doing that, though, so I can see why it's a draw. You know what happens to me a lot, Dr. Michelle, is I get a lot of people hitting my LinkedIn, and now by saying that, I'm going to get even more, I'm sure. They want to be part of my network, and they have nothing to do with broadcasting. What's that all about?
Well, what they're trying to do, Terry, is to draw on your identity, and if they are related to you in some way, if you've befriended them or accepted them as, their request on LinkedIn, what they're trying to do is add to their impression of worthiness because they're drawing on yours.
I can't help them professionally. It's supposed to be a professional and work-related platform, but people come from all over the place. I mean, they're not broadcasters. They're a carpenter. They're a plumber. They're a small business owner. They're a banker. I understand that we cover so many topics here on Think America. So there's a range and we hit a lot of markets. So I understand that, but it's a little out of control. And when I say, no, I'm not interested, it's, wow, you're not interested in having me in your group. I'm glad that when you decline, it's sort of a soft decline. Final thoughts, Dr. Michelle Bankston, and tell us how people can find you online. Speaking of online.
I think, Terry, as we head into this holiday, we need to get back to the idea of being thankful for what we have, recognizing that we each have worth, and trying to do unto others as we would have people do unto us. That's where our worth and our identity come from. If people are looking for me, they can find me at drmichelleb.com or on Facebook, Dr. Michelle Bankson.
Delightful to talk with you. I appreciate your time. You have a wonderful holiday season, and the Do Unto Others has stood the test of time for many, many, many centuries. Thank you for being on the program. We'll be right back. We're back on Think America. I'm Terry Gilberg. You can find me on Facebook, Terry Talk Radio. And please subscribe to our podcast, thinkamericaradio.com. All of our archive shows are there. Just click on the podcast tab and you can hear years of thinkamericaradio.com. Moving on with Tom and Richard. Facebook, guys, has been building a giant facial recognition database that allows them to identify their active users, which is now, believe it or not, well, you probably do believe it, close to 2 billion users. Now, they achieve this by their photo tagging feature, and users, as you undoubtedly know, can voluntarily participate, helping Facebook tag who you know. So if, Tom, you are with me in a picture and somebody doesn't know you're Tom, I can say, this is Tom standing next to Terry. But the company keeps track of the tags, and it has compiled a database of what we all look alike. Many people think this is going too far as an invasion of privacy. Richard, do you? Let me kick off our conversation with that. Do you think that's going too far?
In so many respects, yes. And how do we protect our image when we so willingly give it every day when we walk out in public? But the issue I see is that we have no real privacy laws with this facial recognition technology. And Facebook is a collector of data. They make money by collecting data, and then they sell targeted ads. So they're in the business of this collection. And certainly one's image is a very important piece of data. And we do need ways to protect it because heaven knows Facebook has been a known abuser of the data that they collect.
Well, exactly. And we know all too well what happened when all that data was given to Cambridge Analytics in Cambridge, England, and how they helped to try to sway the election. I don't want my identity managed one way or the other than through me, Tom. So I look at this as a bridge too far. However, Tom, I also realize there's not too much I can do about it. If I'm in a picture with somebody else, they can ask me to tag myself or they can tag me. Sometimes it goes unnoticed by me. I'm too busy. How do you see it, Tom?
It's an invasion of privacy. And it is not a benign, kind, cool thing that we're doing. This is a company that has decided that they're going to do facial recognition. That should send alarms to everyone in the world since it's a worldwide platform. Why in the world would a private company do such a thing? Back in the 90s, we had the little grocery tags and they started sending you coupons. You scan it and all that, maybe a discount. Now coupons show in the mail for stuff you buy. That's fun. That's nice. That's kind of cool. Looking back at it now, it looks like it was the beginning of a slow walk into controlling and tracking all of us. I don't do Facebook for this very reason. When it first came out, I thought to myself, this doesn't sound right. I don't really want to get involved here. So I'm very concerned with it.
Maybe you were sage enough to see what the future is bringing with Facebook. They're in financial trouble, big time, and their stocks have slid this past month in particular. It seems like it's an argument between the Bergs, Zuckerberg and Sandberg, over who's going to take responsibility on privacy issues. They have, though, to their credit, I will say this, they have performed now, and I don't know how you do all this, is way over my pay grade, a kind of opt-out auto tagging device. So they're giving now the user optimal tools to manage the identities on their own platform. But I really think that bell has rung. Going forward, they're making corrections and so forth. Just like going forward, they're making corrections with regard to Cambridge Analytics. Going forward, they're making corrections with regard to trying to be more of a platform that is agnostic, just neutral. But the ship has sailed, and there are many people like you, Tom, that just say, to hell with this. I'm not doing this anymore. Richard, are you on Facebook?
Unfortunately, I am. Very little, but years ago, my wife created a Facebook for me. Here's why the opt-out is a lie. So let's say you opt out of the facial recognition program. How in the world are they able to identify you in someone else's photo to know that you've opted out?
Well, it's a hiccup, isn't it? It's a wrinkle. They'll have to figure this out.
Your image, and they recognize you because of the image that they have kept. Europe has some interesting laws. They created laws that allow people to own the rights to their information online. So if you ask these companies to delete the data, they have to delete the data. We need that
here. All right. Good discussion. We'll have Megan Porth on straight ahead. We'll see what she has to say on this. She is a lawyer, as you know, and libertarian. So she may have a different angle. I'm Terry Gilbert. We'll be right back. Think America. Reason first, and then converse. We're back on Think America, where we reason first, then converse with Megan Porth. Megan Porth always comes in at this time of the show. She is a sponsor and contributor for Think America Radio. She's an attorney. She works in contract law and is the founder and owner of YourContractShop.com, a virtual law firm providing real results. Megan, what is your take on the whole Facebook privacy thing with regard to tagging and auto tagging folks?
Yeah, I don't have much of a problem with it as long as it's in their terms and conditions, which was exactly the issue that we saw Zuckerberg in front of Congress for, is that they weren't notifying the users. And as a contracts attorney, this is something that I talk about all the time, that we get to actively engage in the free market, and we get to allow certain people to do certain things. In exchange, we give up certain pieces of privacy. Very simple example of this is I give my email address for some kind of free perk on a website. That's fine. It's totally legal. We've all engaged. The key is that we must know what they're doing with that information after the fact. Everyone is posting these pictures on Facebook, Terry. You're doing that, and you're engaging in this in a consensual way. But how that information is being used on the back end, everyone needs to be perfectly aware of it, and that's where I think it gets a little dicey on here.
I think it's dicey as well when Cambridge Analytics and Facebook and all the rest, Snapchat and all this, they say, we have this in our contract. You accepted it. Too bad for you that you didn't read the fine print.
Right. And I have to agree with them on that one. The fact that they put a contract out, that they have the terms and conditions, they're available for everyone. And especially with the GDPR that went into place in May of 2018, you have to actually actively look at it in order to sign up for Facebook now. So the big issue that I have with it, Terry, is not necessarily it being used in the private sector and the way that Facebook was planning on using it. It's when they sell that information to the government. That's when I'm the most concerned about this. That's when we get into a big brother state. And especially because facial recognition is not as accurate as it's being portrayed in media, or even from some of these tech companies that are developing facial recognition. And now what's happening is Amazon and Facebook are selling this technology to police departments who are actually using them today, Terry. And that's concerning to me.
And when it comes to mistakes, I can think of 1 million, or shall I say 2 billion, yes, as a reference back to the users, 2 billion mistakes.
Right, 100%. There's a lot of technology or there's a lot of room to develop in this technology. So I think that us experimenting it and playing with it is totally fine. And especially this is why on a private individual level, it's not as dangerous as it is in a public sector in the hands of law enforcement.
Let's go back to how Facebook added this tagging feature. Do you think initially me, Megan, that was an invasion of privacy in the sense that it was a bridge too far. I always ask myself, why do you do this? It's me. I'm controlling my wall. You don't have to have this option, which, people are going to click. It's very knee-jerky to me, and I think it's a bridge too far.
And one of the things that Facebook has said in response to that is that the reason that they're doing this is so that you can protect your privacy, so that other people, Terry, can't post a picture of you and try to claim it as their profile. So they're compiling all of this information about your face so that if someone else tries to create a false profile of you, they won't be able to do it because Facebook will say, no, sorry, this is someone else. So again, there's security, there's privacy, there's freedom. All of those things are being balanced in this in Facebook and the way that they're processing this. But you can always opt out by getting off of Facebook, and that's what I love about it. You cannot opt out of the government.
All right, let's opt out of that. And again, thanks for being on the program and a contributor to Think America. You can find Megan Porth at yourcontractshop.com. She is a sponsor of the program. What have you got in Change Your Life technology?
Well, as you know, Terry, wildfires are a natural occurrence, but of course, when it's close to civilization, it's absolutely devastating. And of course, the free market provides. Seniors out of Montana Vista High School in Cupertino, California, have actually created a device called Smart Wildfire Sensor. It's attached to trees every square mile. And then the device captures images of nearby trees, fallen branches, and leaves, and then it classifies those into 13 different categories of varying threats. Once they get to a certain threat, those images are then sent to local fire crews to go and handle the fire threat before it actually emerges. So this Smart Wildfire Sensor is amazing. It's in beta phase right now, but I can't wait to see what it's going to do.
Well, it could help, but I think the biggest help is, of course, to clean out our forests and even create some meadows, and something that hasn't been seen very much in California. I think you'll agree with that.
Yeah, and this will allow them to do it. They'll be able to see exactly where they need to go ahead and clear out.
Find Megan Porth at yourcontractshop.com, a virtual law firm providing real results. Thank you to Megan. Richard, Tom, I'm Terry Gilbert, Terry Talk Radio. Subscribe to our podcast at thinkamericaradio.com. Remember, reason first and then converse. See you next time. Many boomers during their teens could change a flat tire and change the oil on a car, but can teens today do that? We'll talk about it on the program. Also, if you were a benign dictator and could fix the forest situation and wildfires in California, how would you do it? And lower gas prices, what is causing all of that? Good luck for the American consumer during this holiday season. Welcome to Think America. I'm Terry Gilbert, your host. This is the show where we reason first and then converse. I invite two everyday Americans to come on the program with me. They're non-broadcasters. They come from all over the nation, and they come from different walks of life to chew on thought-provoking conversation starters. And this week is no different. A junior high football coach joins us. He is Tom. Hey, Tom. Nice to have you on board.
Hey, Terry. Thanks for having me.
All right. And Richard. Richard is in the mortgage lending business for home ownership and people who want to get started with first homes. He's a mortgage broker. Hello, Richard.
Hey, Terry.
Let's get right to it, guys. I'm anxious to get to our headlining topic for this weekend. It's speculation that a spark from a high-powered line started the California fires, both in Northern California and Southern California, devastating areas in both areas, particularly in the town of Paradise. It's suggested, of course, that climate change is the culprit. Climate deniers are at fault. We hear that a lot. There's also a lot of blame being leveled on California and federal officials for their poor forest management policies. So I like this idea of if you were ruling the world, Richard, if you were a benign dictator, where in the world would you start on the wildfire issue, particularly in California? How would you do it in a kind, benign way?
I'm not sure how kind and benign the people in California are going to think it is, because their regional laws are absolutely stupid. Federal policy is not much better. Federal policy is to put fires out as fast as you can. That's not always smart. Sometimes you need to let those burn. You need to let nature continue. When lightning strikes and creates a burn, sometimes it's the best thing that can happen. California has the added issue that they don't allow enough prescribed burns because of a clash with their regional air quality regulations. So their fear of carbon emissions has paralyzed them from common sense.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, you're talking about the way that certain laws have crippled them. But this is in some measure because the EPA has been embraced by the tree huggers, and the tree huggers have gone for years, 40, 45 years, to embrace the EPA and get this relationship between the environmentalists and the government to the point where the government says, well, okay, we'll sort of do it your way. So, Richard, it's true. You would have to break up, I guess, the thinking, the link, and change the thinking of government officials with the environmentalist tree hugger crowd. And that might be a tough pill for them to swallow, Richard.
Well, it's going to be a tough pill. I mean, you tell Californians that you're going to have to emit some dirty smoke into the air in order to save lives. They're going to freak out. They have been trained to think and believe that there's no greater sin than carbon going into the air. And unfortunately, it's put them into a very precarious position. It's not that we don't have these issues because, as you said, federal policy is a big part to blame also. Sometimes we really need to let these fires burn. But, the fact is, we have a very divided nation. And when people tell you, if you're a climate denier, you're denying science. Well, we're just denying certain portions of that science that are flawed, and they don't want to hear that. They don't want to believe that. It is their religion, and it is an affront to them that you don't just swallow it hook, line, and sinker. But the fact is, it's killing people. They need to do something about it.
Tom, many of the forested area is on federal land in California, and that's true in other states as well. So if you were a benign dictator and could fix the situation, what area of blame and why would you focus on to minimize fires on the West Coast?
Well, I'll probably sound like a broken record with Richard. It's all about proper forest management, proper wildlife management. You have to clean some of it up on your own periodically. You have to also let fires that occur naturally burn certain areas to clean them up on their own, the hard to reach areas. You set fire lines, but then that's a scar on the land. That the liberals like to talk about. But really, it's just simple, proper forest management. And we did have that at one time. But the EPA, the liberals, they're all about tugging at the heartstrings. They don't want you to use logic. They don't want you to use reason. They don't want you to be intelligent about it. They want to give you the emotional, quote unquote, facts, get you stirred up, and they don't have a full discussion. They don't have an open debate. There is one side pushed and pushed and pushed. And if they start losing, then they go find a federal judge that sees it just like them, and they create laws from the bench.
Well, it is true that the Camp Fire and the fire in the Malibu area, pretty devastating. And what gets me is that this is every single year. It is to be expected, it seems. And so how much more are the people going to be willing to take before they say, well, duh, maybe we need to create meadows. Maybe we need to have some more logging. Maybe we need to, bring back an entire industry, the logging industry. Maybe we need to do it how the Native Americans did it. They would have controlled burns. Yes, the earth burnt, but it was the way to naturally shock the earth to produce new growth. Maybe there needs to be wild areas where wild animals can roam. It's called having a healthy forest, Richard.
Yeah, my father was a firefighter, in fact, in the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so you have to do that. There is so much deadfall in that area from the beetle infestation that they've had. There is so much built up underbrush because of the federal policy of putting fires out quickly. You have to have some kind of fire break, and the roads are clearly not enough. They need places where they have burned out meadows. They have cleared this through prescribed burns and created places to slow fires down and contain them. Fires are a natural part of what happens in a forest. We have stunted that. And for environmental reasons, we have not allowed nature to work and do its thing. And we're not properly stepping in and managing it ourselves. And so those two things together, it's been deadly.
Mm-hmm. Tom,
2 quick points. So the Hollywood elites, the actors, all those people, they were telling us, we got to protect the environment. Don't do these things that'll help keep it safe and keep it clean. But then when the fires started getting near their neighborhoods and their homes, they made sure they spent their money to protect themselves instead of allowing themselves to be just like the people who they encourage to vote idiotically and support stupid forest management. And so those people lost homes and died, but the elites, the Hollywood people, they're fine. They saved their homes. They used their money to protect themselves. They should have just been with the people and let it burn down and rebuild just like the people have to.
Well, I think you're pointing to hypocrisy here, which is a good point. The other thing, back to your earlier point, Tom, is that what I always hear is that the only bottom line is the terrible climate deniers that are at fault. That's the only bottom line. The fact that we don't cut down a tree, well, we're not to blame for that. We'll wait for the rain to come. So if it is climate change and climate deniers, and that's the bottom line at the top of the page, they will always point to droughts and winds saying, well, it's climate change. Well, it's climate change. My response to that back is if you had fewer trees, who cares which way the wind blows? You can handle drought when there's fewer trees, Richard. So they never put that other factor into it. Clean up the kindling, clean out and create meadows. And then maybe you wouldn't have a fire in the first place, regardless of climate change, Richard.
Yeah, in this instance, President Trump was really accurate. It is poor policies that have led to this. This is really simple. This is not, as has been stated over and over again, the sole blame of global warming. The planet's been changing forever. The weather never stays the same. We should be prepared for that. We understand change is going to happen. But the fact that they want to blame it on people who don't support their need to regulate carbon emissions is absolutely idiotic nonsense.
And maybe some of those people should just leave California where the fires are. If they're going to be accepting all these fires, there's some people that say, well, to heck with it. I can't breathe. I got to live with a gas mask, a face mask on all the time. Maybe I'll just leave. But they don't, Tom.
So a decade back or so, Arizona had major wildfires, and it was quite interesting. From an aerial shot, you could see areas of forest that were really healthy and kind of unscathed from the fires, and then you see the fire area. What was the difference? The healthy forest that didn't really burn was all Indian land. It was reservation. They properly managed the forest. I haven't yet had a chance to see what it looks like from a California perspective, but I would be willing to bet we're going to see similar compare and contrast right next to each other. The reservation forest is going to look pretty good, maybe a little burn, and the Californian side is scorched earth.
I think that's a very good point. I'm glad you made it. I was saying to a friend of mine over Thanksgiving who lives in California, we had a phoner on this. I said, well, the problem is you can't see the forest for the trees. And yet they're on fire, all this light that's lit up, but you can't see the forest for the trees. Of course, it was an expression. She didn't appreciate that very well. I will say, in my own defense, she brought the subject up. I used to live in California. Oh my goodness. She says to me, well, everything's on fire and I'm going to wear my face mask in between my Thanksgiving nibbles. I got to put my face mask back on. And I said, well, yeah, that's right. Over the last at least 30 years that I have known her, you can't see the forest for the trees, Richard. They don't clean anything out. Every little acorn that falls is somehow their religion to be worshipped. And now it's on fire. You still can't see the forest for the trees.
It reminds me of my kids when they were little. They did not want to take their medicine. They would just they would spit it out. It was a nightmare trying to get them to take it. That is what it is like to speak common sense to a California liberal. They don't want to hear the solution. They don't want to hear the problem. They want to blame the opposers of their faith, which is global warming.
When President Trump was out there and walked around with Jerry Brown, I think at least Jerry Brown is getting, or did get, the message finally. Great discussion, guys. Let's move on Think America. ThinkAmericaRadio.com. Subscribe to our podcasts. Download all our past episodes and shows. Be right back. We're back on Think America with Richard and Tom, Terry's Talkers, for this show. Hi, guys. Many boomers during their teens could change a flat tire and change the oil on their car, but not so much teens today. In the past, boomers could sew and cook and clean house and do laundry, and boys would have lawn mowing jobs. Girls would babysit. Not so much anymore. Today, self-sufficiency in everyday life is not part of our culture very much. Richard, have we lost our sense of pride in being do-it-yourselfers or weekend warriors?
Yep, we sure have, at least in the younger generation. They don't want to learn how to fix a flat tire. They don't want to learn how to change the oil. They don't want to know how to repair a lawnmower. They want to pay somebody to do that. And it is frustrating. I think there's a tremendous amount of freedom and pride that comes with being able to do things yourself, and that sense of accomplishment of knowing you can handle problems when they come up. And it does seem lost on this younger generation.
Well, if we've advanced as a culture from, let's say, manual labor, that says to us we've kind of arrived. Right? Richard, I'll stay with you for just a bit on this. So to play devil's advocate, isn't that the whole idea? If we're the most progressive culture, if we're the ones with the great ideas and inventions, we're all trying to get our kids through college so they can be the next financial guru, the next Stephen Jobs, the next whomever, the next astronaut, the next Supreme Court, whatever. Why in the world would we want them to mow the lawn? Why in the world would we want them to be a carpenter? We're not training them. Everybody goes to college now. Everybody does algebra and calculus and STEM. And isn't that the whole idea, that we're going to make enough money and be successful enough that you hire somebody to do that?
That's the concept. And, all chiefs, no Indians doesn't really work that well either. We only need so many in management. We only need so many in specific positions. And it seems to me that it has become beneath people to do this kind of work, to the point at which they look down on those that do. I've heard snide comments about everything from work like I do in the mortgage industry to people who go out and mow lawns and do things of that nature.
Tom, your thoughts?
Well, if it's a sign of arriving by doing absolutely nothing and you cannot be self-sufficient anymore, I'm not sure I ever want to arrive. Now we can go a little bit more cynical here, and we see these people at the border and all these immigrants from another country until they come here illegally. They're not yet illegal immigrants, but we see the caravans coming. We see everyone trying to get here. So if we have a society that is pushing Americans to be elitists and to be lazy and just be an academic or an intellectual, then they have to import these folks. because if we won't do it, which is a lie, then we need somebody who will, because those things have to be done.
Well, to Richard's point, you're agreeing. Too many chiefs, not enough Indians. I want to make a point here, Tom. I have a friend who made and continues to make a ton of money, astronomical amounts of money. He's in private equity. His wife left him for what she called a manly man who could fix a pipe. And during their very heated discussion, right before they filed for divorce, she left him. And it was an adulterous relationship, by the way, I might add. He said, I don't need to fix a pipe. I can hire 15, 20, 30 people to fix a pipe. Why are you leaving me for a man to fix a pipe? Now, in his mind, he had arrived, Tom. He didn't want to be a plumber. He was a private equity guru. What do you say to him? He's now got a broken heart.
Well, I personally, that's a shame, and I'm sure there's a lot more there. However, there are certain few like that gentleman who do go up to the highest levels, but that's not a healthy society if everyone has that mindset. We need trade workers. We need intellectuals. We need people like himself that provide the funding for others to try to accomplish their goals in what they want to do.
Okay, Richard, I'll give you the last word on this. We're running out of time.
Yeah, I think that as the case that you mentioned, there are certain women that may be attracted to people who work with their hands. Certainly those kind of instances come up, and people like what they're going to like, but usually relationships fail for a whole stew of reasons. But the fact of the matter is, there is something to be said for people who can fix things. There's something to be said for people who are self-sufficient and capable. And I think it's attractive to a lot of people.
My two sons do know how to change oil, change tires, and cut grass.
Are they teens?
Yes, 16 and 12.
Okay, good for you. Sounds like you have taught them all of that, working with their hands too. And I can see that, you being a football coach. All right. Well, I think it's a shame that we don't know how to do more things. We also need to be more creative, and that would help us be a little more independent as well. I'm all for the weekend warrior and the do-it-yourselfer myself. I like a manly man too. In fact, I got my husband out there hanging up the Christmas lights, and you better do it and get off the golf course. I'm Terry Gilbert. Find me on Terry Talk Radio on Facebook. Subscribe to our podcast at thinkamericaradio.com. Straight ahead, we'll be talking about lower gas prices. Welcome back to Think America. I'm happy to bring to the microphone now an American oil producer, president of Industry Petroleum. You can find him at industrypetroleum.com. Phil Barnett is with us. We've been experiencing a lot of lower gas prices. And also, there's been in the news lingering now for, has it been almost 2 months, the death of Jamal Khashoggi. Trump's reaction to that as well, knowing that the crown prince in Saudi Arabia was in fact behind his death, according to our CIA. I'm bringing you on the air, Phil, because many Americans believe that that death might have something to do with our gas prices. I think they're wrong, but I want you to dispel that. Recently, I read a jaw-dropping article from Bloomberg Business News about how Texas production is rising faster than it has in about 98 years. The oil is here. We're not dependent on Saudi Arabia. This connection with Jamal Khashoggi is not a real connection, and our gas prices are independent of our relationship with the crown prince. Let's take it from there and elaborate, please, Phil.
Certainly. I would say, and first, Terry, thanks for having me. And I have a couple of different companies. Barnett Energy is where all of the new activity is. And for anybody that knows anything about the last 20 years in Texas, horizontal drilling and multi-stage fracking in the Barnett Shale in 17 counties in North Texas is what really revolutionized the industry. And that is the family name named after a great uncle of mine.
Good for you. Now, are you out there in the Permian Basin in West Texas?
Well, actually, I've done drilling all over. We're in West Texas, but we're a little east and north of the Permian Basin in the activity that we have. But obviously, the Permian Basin is where a concentration of activity is happening. And the Permian Basin is not isolated to Texas. It also includes southeastern New Mexico. So there is a lot of production going on out there. And I would say as a point of fact, because I really like, reason first and then converse. So we need to look at the facts and logic and reason. In 2005, as an example, 78% of what we as Americans consumed in refined products was based primarily on imported oil. A large percentage of that was Saudi Arabian oil, and therefore we were very, very dependent on a country that we claim to have a friendly relationship with, but like most of the other petrostates, they either dislike us or out and out hate us and want us destroyed. But we've gone from 78% of what we consume dependent on imports to now nearly 80% of what we consume we produce ourselves. So
this message, Phil, doesn't seem to get out to Americans. Most Americans think, oh, what will my driving be like how will it be at the gas station when I drive for Thanksgiving or over the holidays if we have a bad relationship with Saudi Arabia and this Khashoggi death? They might not know everything about it, but they know that tensions are not the best, that we're not exactly getting along with the Crown Prince. And then when the CIA reports the Crown Prince ordered that death, that's what they believe. Our intelligence services believe this. They're not getting the message that Texas production is rising on the fastest pace it has had in 98 years. That is huge news. So how to dispel this myth that we're so connected to Saudi Arabia?
Well, and I will tell you, it's really one of orchestrated perception, I would say, because when the President of the United States, the largest consumer of refined fossil fuels, thanks Saudi Arabia for lower prices, that tends to be parroted over and over again. And that is really political expediency. We need a friendly, Muslim-dominated country in the region just for basic stability. But the practical reality is since new drilling techniques, new completion techniques, which is what hydraulic fracturing is, and more recently, production innovations, our dependence has just completely flipped, which has changed geopolitics. But we still need a friendly or as friendly as possible relationship with Saudi Arabia just to maintain some kind of balance in the region. But as far as being dependent on them, let alone think back in the Carter administration when the embargo happened, they had us by the throat. I believe President Trump knows exactly what went on as much as any American does. And I believe this is a typical deal maker that he is. This is the typical kind of leverage that I believe he's got the Crown Prince and the kingdom as a whole right where he wants them. You might say by the throat, but he definitely has them right where he wants them. And that is why he is being effusive in his praise. I think it's empty. I think it's meaningless when it comes to the price of oil, but it's a political move that that affords some stability in a region that is historically volatile.
I see. All right. So Saudi Arabia and the other OPEC countries, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Venezuela, the whole cartel will be gathering for their OPEC December 6th meeting in Vienna. Do you believe they will be cutting prices? And if so, Phil, are we expected with the oil that we do get, and now Europe gets a lot of it, most of it, I understand, but with the oil that we do get at about somewhere I'm reading to $2 a gallon through the holidays, do you anticipate that after the December 6th meeting of OPEC in Vienna?
Well, Saudi Arabia illustrated on the Friday after Thanksgiving 2014, when they attempted to globally manipulate prices, that just simply doesn't work. They don't wield the kind of clout that they used to. And in fact, the United States, led primarily by Texas, recently became the largest oil producer in the world. Number 2 is Russia. Number 3 is Saudi Arabia. So the only way they can hope to influence prices is by their production levels, but it simply hasn't worked. They have attempted to put people like me, the U.S. producer, out of business. They've run a lot of people out that probably didn't belong in this industry, but it simply hasn't worked. And I don't think there is a single thing that they can do to dramatically influence prices. If they want prices to go lower, they're going to produce more and therefore make less. They're likely to come out with some seemingly unified voice that says they're going to restrict production to try to get the price of a barrel of oil up. Again, that is primarily Brent crude. It's primarily oil that is produced in the Middle East or in Russia that is then consumed in the European and the rest of the developed world. We absolutely could be supplying 100% of our own needs, not only now, but Texas alone with current technology has enough oil that we could recover to supply the United States for 1,000 years.
That is phenomenal.
They could do what they want, but the simple fact is they're no longer the 800-pound gorilla. They may be within OPEC, but when it comes to what courses through the cardiovascular system of the global economy being oil, we are truly the 800-pound gorilla again, and likely will be for the foreseeable future.
And we need to wrap it there, but I'm happy you are helpful in getting this message out to American listeners that it is led by Texas, led by the United States, Russia being second, and Saudi Arabia being third. I hope you come back and visit with us on another edition of Think America. Phil, you're invited.
Thank you very much. I look forward to it.
Phil Barnett, industrypetroleum.com. He's the president. You can find him there. He's all over the internet on oil and gas. We're back on Think America with Terry's Talkers, Richard and Tom. Did you like that interview with Phil Barnett?
Yeah, I loved it.
And Tom?
Fantastic. Fantastic information. I hope the entire country gets it.
I think he was able to wrap up this big issue down to his term elephant in the living room. The big gorilla in the living room is exactly what I think he said. All right, let's move on, guys. The term walled garden, have you heard of it? It implies something beautiful, of course, about being surrounded by walls, but in technology, it means closed technology platform. Closed technology platform. And Apple has a walled garden. Now Uber and Lyft want to create their separate walled gardens in cities predominantly by adding mobility modes to their list of approved apps. For example, both Lyft and Uber want to add e-scooters and bike sharing operators as part of their approved apps. And Uber has taken steps to do this. Car sharing is one way. We know about Uber and car sharing, of course. But now they want these e-scooters, bike sharing, and they're dreaming up other ways with mobility apps. Lyft is not left on the sidelines on this. They are up for the challenges as well. So these two companies, though, are getting criticism in the business news about how they are controlling a whole market. Is it good for the consumer? Are we headed to a monopoly with Uber and Lyft? Richard?
Very likely. The walled garden term is interesting. I wonder if people in solitary confinement call it their walled garden. When we allow companies to get access to all aspects of any one field, like travel, or like we saw with the oil monopoly of the Rockefeller years, and Standard Oil even after, we put ourselves in a prison. We're stuck. And why we're not doing more to push back with the appropriate antitrust laws in place, going after and breaking up these companies. But it doesn't seem like we do anymore. It seems like we promote it, which is a little frightening.
Tom, what is your take on this? On the one hand, we say, well, it's the free market. We say things like buyer beware. We say things like, the first one up is, as my father used to always say, is the best dressed. Basically, the early bird gets the worm. Go, go, go. American enterprise, American capitalism. And then when somebody rises to the top, like the cream rises to the top, that expression, then we say, wait. You're going to control the market. How do you see this?
Well, I swear Richard and I don't share a brain, but I agree with him wholeheartedly. The federal government isn't breaking up these monopolies. And I think the reason is that the monopolies get created, then they send money over to these politicians and these political parties, and they all become one good old boys and girls backdoor meetings and all that other stuff. It's very, very sad and disheartening to me to see these companies building up and then taking over a market and monopolizing it. But, we just created another company with a different name, so we're throwing off the general public. It's all well and good. The cream rises to the crop, but you can have a 90% top person. You can have 100% top person. There's A minus, A plus. There's all different degrees of being at the top. And all of those should be competing with each other, not getting bought out by one entity that creates several.
I think what you're saying is we talk like we have a free market, Tom, but in reality, practically speaking, we don't. There's all this jockeying for position behind the scenes. The rich continue to seem to get richer and richer. They have the right tools to keep themselves dominated as the richest, and this is a way to have a monopoly. By the way, in 2018, Uber announced partnerships or acquisitions related car sharing called Get Around, an e-bike sharing called Jump, e-scooter sharing called Lime, and public transportation called Masabi. So I tend to agree with you, Tom. This is, whether you call it these different names or not, it really is a lot of market share, market control, and these two seem to be dominating for the most part. Down to 30 seconds. Richard, what's your final take?
We need to be careful. Facebook, Google, these are companies that have shown they are not responsible. They are at a level at which, in my opinion, they are in breach of antitrust laws. And we really do need some kind of politician, some type of Department of Real Justice that's willing to go and clean this mess up.
All right, let's leave it there. And Megan Porth will be with us. She's an attorney. We'll see what she has to say, because she's, of course, always looking at legal documents and contracts. She joins Terry's Talkers and me right after this. Be right back. We are Think America Radio, thinkamericaradio.com. We're back with Megan Porth. She is, as you know, a contributor on Think America Radio, and she sponsors this segment. She's an attorney. She works in contract law and is the founder and owner of yourcontractshop.com, which is a virtual law firm providing real results. Megan, we've been talking about the walled garden, the technology. And technology, it means a closed technology platform. The problem with this is that it sounds like Uber and Lyft having their own walled garden, trying to create their own separate walled garden, and cities are taking over the mobility app opportunities, creating kind of a monopoly. And yet we say we have a free market in America. How do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, I still see this as a free market option. We have a number of walled gardens that we use all the time. Facebook is a phenomenal example of that, Terry, where we are only seeing the information that they are allowing to come in. And in fact, it's really hard for Google to even sweep through Facebook's technology and Facebook's content when it comes to any of its SEO or its algorithms. So this isn't a new concept. This is actually an old one. The reason I kind of feel like sometimes people pick on Uber and Lyft a lot. Uber and Lyft are such a unique, the idea of the sharing economy makes people very uncomfortable, Terry, including the government. The governments around the world have tried to limit Uber or ride sharing in general, right? It's not safe. And then now there's more congestion, and now they're taking away jobs from taxis. And now we have this issue where we don't want them to have a walled garden. I actually don't have a problem with this for a couple of reasons. One of them is because these companies are given a lot of heat for losing their clients and their users' information. And in order to ensure security, you can have a walled garden where you're not exposed and open to every single attack that's out there. It doesn't mean that it's going to stop attacks, but it allows them to control what is coming in and what is going out of their space. The other reason I don't have an issue with it is because we're already functioning in this free market and utilizing these walled gardens, and it's working just fine. What the biggest complaint that I've seen as far as Uber and Lyft utilizing a walled garden is that they aren't allowing the public transportation apps or the public transportation applications to integrate within their walled garden, that someone is going to have to go to Uber's app or Uber's walled garden.
Right.
So a lot of people have, they're concerned about that and its effect on people who utilize public transportation. But the truth is that people who utilize public transportation and that is their only option, they are going to figure out a way to do it. And Terry, if that actually becomes an issue, as always, the free market will respond. Uber and Lyft are not going to miss out on an entire opportunity of individuals out there who are trying to not own a car, or they can't afford a car, whatever the option is. So I don't see this as being as big of an issue as everybody else's. And again, I think Uber and Lyft are picked on all the time because it's such a unique business model and people are nervous about it.
To that point, I don't see Facebook picked on. Facebook piggybacked off of MySpace, and MySpace got kicked to the curb because Facebook had a better platform. And now I don't see anybody trying to really take their dominance away, when every time we turn around, it is this is a monopoly we're looking at.
Right.
Then it robs from creativity. It robs from innovation. Somebody had to come up with the idea first, get patents, get copyrights and so forth, and press ahead with capital and make something of it. The creativity then it can be this idea that it's just going to be shared with anybody and everybody, piggybacking off of it, is also not the American way. So to your points, Megan, I tend to side with you.
Yeah, they just, again, we're scared of something that's new. And Uber and Lyft are constantly being picked on. I love it. I love the business model.
Well, and I also think there's plenty of walled gardens, a part of our American tradition. What do you got in Change Your Life technology?
Today, we're talking about diabetic retinopathy, and it's a complication of diabetes that results in blindness. This is something that people talk about all the time, especially in the United States. 50% of all cases go undiagnosed because the diagnoses can be extremely expensive. There's a young woman, Kava Kopaparu, as a high school student. She developed a smartphone app that can screen for the disease with the help of a specially trained artificial intelligence app. and then a 3D printed lens that's attached to the phone. And it can be used in places like the slums in India, which is where her grandfather was diagnosed and lost his eyesight. And she's trained neural networks to recognize pictures of what DR looks like. And she has 34,000 retinal scans. She's not quite there as far as the human trials are concerned. She has to have a lot of diagnoses that are accurate coming up before this can be used on a large scale. But it's called iGnosis, which I thought was really cute.
Find all of our segments and all of Change Your Life technology on thinkamericaradio.com. Thank you to Megan. Thank you to Tom and to Richard, all of our listeners, all of our affiliates. I'm Terry Gilbert. Reason first and then converse.